Before I talk about this, or before we talk about this a little bit in depth, I want to say something. In no way, shape, or form am I blaming Deshaun Watson for what is going on between the relationship that is Myles Garrett and the Cleveland Browns. I'll say this one more time. In no way, shape, or form am I blaming Deshaun Watson, the person, for the relationship seemingly issues that Myles Garrett and the Cleveland Browns have. With that being said, the saying is, with every action comes a reaction. With every decision comes a consequence. Let's not get it confused here. Myles Garrett is one of, if not the best defender in football. If not one of the best players in all of football. And I think that, I know that, it's not a think. I know that times are changed when we talk about sports in general. Back in the day, it was almost understanding, and it was almost uniform that it didn't really matter how good or bad your team is. There's a sense of quote unquote loyalty that players would have to their team. On top of that, free agency was a lot more strict and the salary cap was a lot more strict. And you couldn't really make a lot of moves as a player. Whatever team drafted you, whatever team you were on, it was extremely hard to leave that team. Or let me say this, it was harder to leave that team back then than it is today. So it gave a sense of loyalty to a team. Let me again say that Myles Garrett is one of the best players in all of football. One of the ways that the game is different today than it was back in the day is a lack of patience. Now, do not hear me say I'm not saying that Myles Garrett hasn't been patient. I think Myles Garrett has been extremely patient with the Cleveland Browns. In fact, I think his patience is a larger reason why we are here. Again, every action has a reaction. Every decision has a consequence. Gone are the days where elite players are just okay with losing. Not saying that they were okay with losing back then, but again, it was almost foreign that you hear star players in the NFL back in the day request trades. It just didn't really happen. But that's not where we're at today. Gone are the days where you're okay with letting your superstar talent just rot away on a losing team. That's not where we're at. And that's clearly not where Myles Garrett is at. Myles Garrett, no, he's the reigning defensive player of the year on a 3-win team. And Myles Garrett officially requested a trade out of the Cleveland Browns. And I don't think there's one person outside of the Cleveland Browns organization that is shocked or upset with him for making this decision. You see, I'm not blaming Deshaun Watson for this, where we're at now with Myles Garrett and the Cleveland Browns. But what I will say is this. When you take a swing as big as the Cleveland Browns signing Deshaun Watson to then the most guaranteed money in NFL history, especially when you look at everything that's happened to Deshaun Watson off the field and his lengthy injury history. With a move like that, you have to hope that it hits. You have to hope that you knock that decision. That decision is a knock in the park, because if not, it has such dire ramifications. And as we're seeing, not only did that decision not pan out the way that they wanted to, it is widely viewed now when you look at how Deshaun Watson has played and just his availability after signing that contract. It is viewed as one of the worst, if not the worst contract in NFL history. It is viewed as one of, if not the worst NFL decisions in the history of the sport. And while I'm not blaming Deshaun Watson, because again, if you offer me as much money as they offered Deshaun Watson, if you offer that to anybody, I don't know many people that would say no to that. I said this, in negotiation in sports, you're worth what they're willing to pay. So if they're willing to pay you $275 million fully guaranteed, who are you? Why would I say no? But now, you look at the landscape of the team, and it would be much different. And we're going to talk about in a second a situation where going all in has a positive effect in the moment, but now you're seeing the ramifications later on. But it still had the desired effect in the beginning. When we look at this Cleveland Browns situation, it hasn't gone right from day one. On top of the fact that now you're so hampered and so attached to Deshaun Watson that you really can't make any moves. You can't afford many players. You can just hope to get a player in the draft, but is Cam Ward, who I think is going to be exceptional, is Shador Stevens, who I think is going to be exceptional. Are they the pieces to turn around such a dysfunctional organization? One of the worst organizations in sports when we talk about some of the transactions that they've made. You see, all of this is like a smoothie. All of this is like a blender. You throw in the Deshaun Watson contract and how it hampers your team. You throw in the fact of Deshaun Watson gets hurt. Re-tears his ACL, so he's probably going to be out next year. You throw in the fact of, even with that, you still owe him what you owe him. Like, you're unable to make moves, on top of the fact of you're hoping that one of the rookie quarterbacks is going to be your savior, or you may have money to bring in someone like a Kirk Cousins or an Aaron Rodgers or a Russell Wilson maybe, but are those pieces going to take you over the top? You throw in the fact that you don't really have faith in your front office because you see the decisions that they've made. You start stirring up this concoction and you get what you get with Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett, you expect Myles Garrett to be one of the top players in football, to continue to sit and watch this around him and let his prime continue to wither away? No. Which again, gets to where we get to. Now, it is a trade request. The Cleveland Browns do not have to answer his request. They don't have to give him what he wants. I think he still has 2 years left in his deal. But that also shows the time that we're in. Teams and team decisions are as visible now than they've ever been because of the access that we get to the league, because of social media, because we are just, we're just able to see what happens. And I think the perfect example, if you want a comparison, is kind of what we're seeing in a certain extent with Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat. Now, no, Myles Garrett hasn't gone to the level of Jimmy Butler as far as digging your feet into your request and saying, yo, no, I want to be out of here. But the way that Pat Riley and the Heat organization treated the exit with LeBron James, treated the ending with D Wade, treating this Jimmy Butler situation, players around the league are seeing that. And whether you think they're right or not, there are players that's going to dictate their free agency decisions off of how they treat this Jimmy Butler situation. There are players that are going to, if you do not, I'm not saying that you have to send him where he wants to go. But if you do not acquiesce to this Myles Garrett situation, from what we've known, Myles Garrett has been a model citizen for the Cleveland Browns and Cleveland. If you essentially hold him hostage to his contract, there are players that are going to see that as like, why would I go to an organization that essentially, Myles Garrett's probably the best player Cleveland's had since Jim Brown. So it's like, what are we doing? Why would I go there and you can't even treat your best player with respect like that? Nah. It's going to be interesting. But with every action comes a reaction. And this has been brewing since Myles Garrett essentially came into the league. Myles Garrett has played at a level. And it's almost funny. Almost every single time people talk about the Cleveland Browns, for the last few years now, it's always been said that they have a roster to compete at the highest level. They just never get there, whether it's due to the quarterback, whether it's due to some front office decisions. They never get to that point. It doesn't help that you play in arguably the toughest division in football, in the AFC North. But roster-wise, Cleveland has for the last, I'll say, 3 or 4 years now, has had the roster to compete with the Baltimore Ravens, to compete with the Cincinnati Bengals, to compete with a Pittsburgh Steelers. Yet, as we sit here today, I think they won 3 games last year. If I'm Myles Garrett, if you're Myles Garrett, do you think he should sit around and hope that something just changes and the front office gets it together, even though there has shown absolutely no signs of that even being possible? I don't. I understand completely why he wants or requested a trade. He's been the consistent in Cleveland when nearly everything around him has been inconsistent. And there gets to a point where you just get tired of it. And it's like, wait, I'm good enough to be a missing piece on a championship caliber team. I'm good enough to be the piece on a championship caliber team. We've seen that. I know it's the way that, the rules and the game is played. It's leaned so heavily offensively, but we've seen players like a Von Miller. We've seen players on the defensive side of the ball be the reason why a team wins a Super Bowl. I know it was a while ago, but the Legion of Boom was a major reason why the Seattle Seahawks won a Super Bowl. A defensive play changed the trajectory of the Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs. The first time the Kansas City Chiefs and the Eagles met, 2 years ago. So if you're Myles Garrett, it's like, why am I wasting my years in an organization that has shown that they don't know what they're doing? I get it. There's no shock in me. I'm shocked that it lasted as long as it lasted. Again, and I'll say this for the last time, I'm not blaming Deshaun Watson for this. But when you give a player the contract that you gave Deshaun Watson, especially when we know all the external factors that you're getting with Deshaun Watson, you need and you pray that hits. I'm not even saying that you have to win a Super Bowl, but you have to look like a competent team. You have to win more than 3 games. And you didn't do that. So there's no shock why Myles Garrett has reached what he reached. It's funny, man. There's a couple teams that I think he'd be perfect for. And 2 of the teams are in his division. So I don't know if that's going to happen because it's hard for me to see anybody in the AFC North do business with each other. But I could see him. He would do wonders, especially when we don't know what's going to happen with Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard. He would do wonders in Cincinnati. He'd be great for Baltimore. Kyle Van Noy had an incredible season, but he's getting up there in age. You pair him alongside a Kyle Hamilton, see what happens with Marlon Humphreys, Roquan Smith. That would force you talking about last year. Baltimore really struggled with a pass rush. Him at a BK, like, man, I can see the Commanders. I'm not just saying this because I'm a homer. I'm saying it because Bobby Wagner is a free agent. Like, most of the offense or defense is free agents at this point. And as we saw last year, one of the biggest sore spots for the Commanders was their defense. So you're definitely going to have some suitors. And Myles Garrett is still at that point of his career where he can be a seismic change for whatever team he lands on. Imagine Myles Garrett on the Detroit Lions. Like, come on. Like, we'll see. But I think all of this is me saying I'm not shocked at all that we got to this point. I think I'm shocked that it took as long as it took. Oh, man, you stayed to the end of the video. I appreciate you. If you like what you saw, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss any content from your boy. You can also go back and watch past episodes, past clips, and don't forget that the Unpopular Podcast, new episodes drop every Wednesday and Saturday. Appreciate you.